Welcome back to How Hamilton Works. This is part 2 in the series on how rap works in Hamilton. Last time we talked about argument, specifically how argumentative language brings hip-hop and the Founding Fathers together. But how rap works in Hamilton goes far beyond just that Venn diagram. In fact, the genre of hip-hop itself is used in Hamilton as a metaphor. Let's go. The basic structure of a metaphor is X equals Y. You're saying poetically that one thing represents or symbolizes another thing.
Ogres are like onions.
Usually there are specific qualities that both things share that the metaphor is emphasizing.
They stink?
Yes.
No. Oh, they make you cry?
No.
Or in the case of Shrek, failing to emphasize.
Layers! Ogres have layers. Onions have layers? You get it!
Or to bring it back to hip-hop, one of the most ingenious examples of an extended metaphor is Common's I Used to Love Her, where the girl he used to love
I met this girl when I was 10 years old.
turns out to be hip-hop itself.
I'm talking about y'all as hip-hop.
Common is talking about hip-hop, X, by borrowing qualities it might share with the former lover, Y.
The H.E.R stands for like hip-hop in its essence and real. And all I'm talking about is how I first came into contact with hip-hop music and how it evolved into where it is now.
She was there for me, and I was there for her. But then she broke to the West Coast. And told her if she got an image and a gimmick, then she can make money. And she did it like a dummy. But I'ma take her back, hoping that the shit stop.
Going back to Hamilton, when I say Hamilton uses metaphor, I mean that hip-hop becomes the Y, the thing that is borrowed from in order to symbolize a variety of things in the story of Hamilton. So what things am I talking about? Let's break it down.
야, 이거 진짜 상징적인 거네.
Every musical uses the basic metaphor of strong emotion equals singing, dancing, and music. But the type of music can add another layer of metaphor on top of this. A composer might use a specific genre of music to further the story. In the milieu approach, that metaphor is slightly more literal. So when a musical is depicting an ethnicity such as the Jewish people in Fiddler on the Roof, we hear it represented by Jewish-sounding music. And then when the Russians show up, the musical represents them with some Russian-sounding music. And this is the approach Lin took in the Heights, when he represented the Dominican Republic enclave of Washington Heights with the music of Latin America. And largely, this type of musical literalism is what happens in jukebox musicals, where Carole King sings songs by Carole King about Carole King's life in Beautiful. And even in period pieces, literalism doesn't have to be completely literal, it just has to be close enough. For example, in 1776, there's a song called The Lees of Old Virginia, which sounds an awful lot like... But Old MacDonald first appeared in 1917, over 100 years after 1776, but yet still referencing it evokes an old-timey sort of Americana that kinda works. And to be clear, Hamilton does engage with this type of period literalism. The opening fanfare features a snare drum rhythm played live on a pre-Civil War style gut snare that Hamilton percussionist Andreas Ferrero calls the voice of the show. He plays it throughout the show, including this prominent riff at the end of Right Hand Man. Clearly a nod to the fife and drum style that usually represents the Revolutionary War and Americana. But we could take this music as a metaphor idea further than this type of literalism, and we can add music that is completely unrelated to the milieu of the characters in order to add an extra layer of meaning. Perhaps the mother of all musical genre metaphors might be Jesus Christ Superstar, and it's right there in the title, the life of an historical and religious figure combined with the trappings of modern rock superstardom, groupies, and a hippie lifestyle. A more recent example would be Spring Awakening. Emo music didn't exist in 1890s Germany when the play takes place, and yet by combining the genre with the time period, Spring Awakening evokes the angst of those teens who had the same hormones as those of today, but sadly didn't have a healthy way to express and deal with them. So how does hip-hop as a metaphor work in Hamilton? Side note, even though I'm using the terms rap and hip-hop interchangeably, they do refer to slightly different things. Yes, both refer to the same genre of music, but rap also refers to a vocal delivery noted by rhythmic speaking and rhyming. Hip-hop also refers to a cultural movement that includes art, dance, politics, and so much more. And with that, we're back. Why would hip-hop be any good at representing the founding fathers? Well, according to Lin, one reason Alexander Hamilton embodies hip-hop is that he
caught beef with every other founding father.
So in one way, the metaphor is also that hip-hop equals a type of beef. Since the beginning, hip-hop has been known for its famous feuds or beefs, which were duels fought with diss tracks and rap battles. In fact, Lin acknowledges he was influenced by famous musical beefs such as the Nas vs. Jay-Z rivalry, culminating in one of the greatest diss tracks ever, H.E.R.
Put your soul like ether. Teach you the king, you know you. Godson across the belly. I prove you lost already.
When I was writing Hamilton, I listened to Takeover and H.E.R. on a loop, on a loop, on a loop.
Word.
Putting it in the world of battle rapping makes it visceral. And Hamilton comes in, you know, it's him basically ethering Jefferson.
Perhaps that's why Sondheim's Witch uses a rap in Into the Woods. She is expressing her beef against the baker's father. But to take it even deeper, beefs are commonly described using the metaphors of war. Listen to Nas talk about his beef with Jay-Z.
And when we went to war, we killed everything out there. There was only me and him left on the battlefield. What else do these warriors do? Do they still fight it out to the end?
In this case, war is just the metaphor for a real-life hip-hop battle. In the case of Hamilton, it's the war, the American Revolution, not to mention an historic duel that are the real events, and it's the hip-hop beef that is the metaphor. That might explain why hip-hop works so well as a metaphor in Hamilton. Lin takes a pre-existing metaphorical relationship between hip-hop and war and inverts it. And because all the connections are already there, the metaphor fits, to use another metaphor, like a glove. Notably, this is a departure from In the Heights, where Lin specifically attempted to detach hip-hop from violent imagery.
I think rule number one that went into my writing of Heights is, you know what, no one's gonna have a knife, and no one's gonna be a gang member. Let's create a, for me, more realistic world in this neighborhood where you actually see the small business owner and not the guy on the corner.
And he did this purposefully to avoid playing into the stereotype of the violent Hispanic gang member.
Because I knew I wanted a life in this world. I knew that musicals were what brought me joy, but I didn't want to hold a knife for the rest of my life.
But in Hamilton, Lin feels free to let that violent imagery in hip-hop shine. Why? Because in Hamilton, Lin is recontextualizing hip-hop as being the music of celebrated war heroes and patriots. In this way, he cleverly allows people who don't like rap to nevertheless embrace its imagery as one of a shared American identity. For example, the line,
"Those red coats don't want it with me, cause I will pop, chicka black, stop till I'm free,"
is using the imagery of a group like NWA when they subversively rapped about killing corrupt cops. But in Hamilton, it's the American historical figure John Lawrence who says he wants to kill the British cops, which is a stance Americans all agree with. In fact, we celebrate it as a country every July 4th. By taking something familiar and injecting into it a subversive energy, the metaphor of hip-hop actually makes the dangers Lawrence faced more relatable.
This is a story of America then told by America now. We're going to use every tool at our disposal to eliminate the distance between a modern audience and something that happened 200 some odd years ago.
But of course, hip-hop is not just an American phenomenon. Indeed, all over the world, hip-hop has taken hold as a worldwide engine of revolutionary change. Forthright, Stronger Than a Weapon is a book by Sasha Krauss photographing and interviewing 43 hip-hop artists from over a dozen countries who have used hip-hop to stand up against inequality and social shortcomings. Their songs have created social movements, gave voice to people who didn't have a voice, and, in at least one case, resulted in a rapper becoming an elected official. And it's this idea of the underdog rising up that I think Lin connected with. See, Hamilton was born on the Caribbean island of Nevis and grew up on St. Croix, not too far from the home of Lin's own family in Puerto Rico.
The fact that Hamilton left the Caribbean to come to New York to get his education, I always tell people, I'm just playing my dad.
So the story of the man who left the islands to find success in New York wasn't too far from Lin's own heritage. And even though Hamilton technically wasn't a person of color, he was the son of a Scotsman and a Frenchwoman, Hamilton's peers still called him
Creole bastard.
And so with these elements in play, Lin was able to mash up the story of an immigrant bastard founding father with hip-hop's representations of the underprivileged.
Immigrants, we get the job done.
But the metaphor doesn't even stop there. A 2015 study by Music Match showed that on Wikipedia's list of best-selling music artists, the genre with the largest vocabulary was hip-hop. Individually, Eminem had the biggest vocabulary, followed by Jay-Z and Tupac, all with vocabularies of over 6,000 words. As hip-hop is an extremely wordy genre of music, it finds common ground with Hamilton, who is an extremely wordy writer and speaker.
Your music is rap.
Yes, and I also believe that that form is uniquely suited to tell Hamilton's story because it has more words per measure than any other musical genre. And if Hamilton had anything in his writings, it was this density.
For example, in Cabinet Battle No. 1, Hamilton continues to rap even after the musical accompaniment has ended.
Hey, turn around, bend over, I'll show you where my shoe fits.
Indicating that he's so brilliant with words that he can't be contained. The density of hip-hop itself becomes a metaphor similar to the density of verse dramas going all the way back to Shakespeare's time. See, back then, characters in straight plays regularly spoke in rhymes to indicate to the audience that what they were saying was really thought out and brilliant. Many plays were written entirely in rhymes.
Unhappy hour, that loving child should see his father dear before his face, thus put to death should be.
So arguably, Lin wasn't creating a new tradition, but was reviving an old one.
Verse drama was the mode of drama for thousands of years. Yeah, naturalism is like the new thing.
And by contrast, some composers use a lack of rhyme to indicate that a character is less than brilliant. In Into the Woods, Jack sings the only song in the show, and in Sondheim's entire career, that doesn't rhyme to show that he's not all there in the head. Meanwhile, Sondheim's witch is a brilliant mind, and so she raps with many internal rhymes, except it still never quite sounds like hip-hop. And that might be because Sondheim uses rap as a form, meaning a stylized speech over a beat, but not actually any hip-hop culture, aka vernacular. Which is what I'll be talking about in the next video. In the meantime, if you want to learn more about how songwriting works, you can head over to Soundfly's new Songwriters Workshop, an online class all about the fundamentals of creating great songs. And with the code HHMusic15, you can enroll in that class for 15% off. So go check that out. Before I go, I want to thank my newest patrons, David Liu and Red KB. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Peace.